And because here's the thing, there's a lot of executive orders, there's a lot of we're going after, there's a lot of bluster, a lot of drinking from the fire hose, if you will. And as we've been saying here in the program for quite some time, there's going to be a lot of that, a lot of the chasing the being the cat chasing the laser pointer or the string, whatever. But the dangerous stuff, the really bad stuff, is what's going to be not out in front. It's why our CEO class has jumped in bed with Trump. And here to share some thoughts on week one with the CEO class with their snouts deeply in the government trough. I've asked my good friend Jeff Hauser to come share some thoughts. Jeff is the executive director of the Revolving Door Project. You can check out their website, the revolvingdoorproject.org. They've got a corruption calendar, and they're paying attention to exactly what I've been saying. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Love to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, how bad was week one?
I mean, week one was terrific if you happen to be a billionaire, especially if you're from big tech. Let's say your goal in life is to make artificial intelligence the next big thing, even if there is no proven value for it. I mean, obviously, if you're in high school and you don't like writing essays, there might be real value to Chat GPT at this point. But for society, not so much. But if you have been one of the beneficiaries of trillions of dollars of new stock market wealth as part of the artificial intelligence bubble, this was a great week because President Trump has committed his administration to building as many data centers in this country as possible and to providing each one of those data centers with electricity. Because the dirty secret of artificial intelligence is that to whatever extent it does or doesn't work, it eats energy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It creates an enormous amount of new demand for electricity, which is going to lead to higher electricity prices for all of us, and also a lot more natural gas and coal being used, and so therefore emissions into the atmosphere. It also means eminent domain. So we're going to see lots of people losing their property across the country because these voracious data centers and artificial intelligence companies want their land. So we're seeing all sorts of weird stuff happening across the country. And President Trump has put his administration at the forefront of making that happen, just so that people like Sam Altman and Microsoft leaders and OpenAI, Anthropic, all these companies are going to do really well. And then Elon Musk is going to get a lot of other stuff. So big week for the tech overlords.
But wasn't Musk against this AI plan? Because I got to think that he wanted that.
Well, yeah. So they all want to suck at the government teat, but they also don't want their competitors to, because to some extent, the way that the artificial intelligence rollout is being sold to the market is that they're going to be winners and losers. And so Elon Musk had a really kind of dramatic breakup with Sam Altman and some other CEOs a couple of years ago. There's a lot of litigation going on. And so Elon Musk is investing hugely in artificial intelligence via his company. And he's upset at the fact that Trump is helping out other billionaires with their efforts, which will be in competition. Because the way you get rich in this country is not competition. It is figuring out a way to not have competition. And Elon Musk understands that.
No. And look, I had someone say some pretty nasty things about my mother being a welfare queen, because when I was a child, we were on and off welfare several times. The true welfare queen, if you really want to look into it, Elon Musk. I mean, oh my gosh, this guy has taken more than half of cities when you look at the amount of money that our government has given him. And
oh yeah, I mean, Barack Obama should own a large chunk of Tesla.
Exactly, and
this is what the Obama administration did for them.
Right, and this is where these people, they talk about how much they hate government, how much they want to destroy government. But boy, they've sure figured out how to line their pockets, and I think that's what we're going to see the next at least 2 years, as Trump does his retribution thing, as he throws what against the wall just to get attention. We're going to see the real welfare queens, the ones who live in the C-suites and who dine at the top of penthouses and buildings and have their own private golf clubs. we're going to see those people with their snouts, well, their whole head in the trough.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that we're also tracking is that even when there are some uh, a little bit unexpected cabinet appointments. So RFK Jr., who I'm not a fan of, but is definitely not a traditional Republican pick at Health and Human Services,
Just a coup.
or um, uh, a former like a daughter of a Teamster as Secretary of Labor. If you start looking at the deputy secretary in each of those departments, you start seeing traditional Republican lobbyist types. So I think the corporations and your billionaire class, they don't get tricked and they don't get distracted. And so if you're wondering how is there a sort of pro labor secretary, it's because the CEOs are like, don't worry, we're going to hem her in. She's not going to have any real power. So we are seeing that across the executive branch, in the agriculture department, you name the department, there are people there to make sure that the corporate class should be very, very happy.
And look, they're firing, career bureaucrats, as we speak, to put in, social media tested, loyalty tested, patronage hires to do everything that the billionaire class wants. And that hasn't gotten as much reporting as I think it should. Look, we've been talking about it for over a year when Project 2025 came out, and they were doing this vetting, and I was saying this is making patronage great again. And Donald Trump could have disavowed as much as he wants. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, and they're getting rid of people who are really genuinely boring and non-ideological. If you are willing to stick it out as a senior civil servant in this country, that means you were okay with George W. Bush's presidency. In fact, you stuck around for Trump's presidency. Like, you have a pretty significant tolerance for right-wing governance. So the idea that the people who are being displaced by Donald Trump are these left wing, Jacobin reading, intellectual lefty types or whatever is just ludicrous. It's not
Yeah.
just because I know a lot of these people by living in Washington, D.C., or having worked in government myself. It's just common sense that somebody who stayed in government in the last couple of decades has been willing to have some pretty right wing Republican president. So you got to ask, what is wrong with those people from the perspective of Trump administration? And I think it's just they know stuff. And if you know stuff, you might disagree and it might get a little bit embarrassing.
Yeah.
So rather than deal with that embarrassment or sense of shame, you fire them.
Yeah, I mean, they might overreach. Like, I would argue the last week, but I think it's going to get a whole lot worse. But I want to talk about the data centers and stuff because I look at Elon Musk doing the whole brain chip thing. I look at these data centers. I look at all this AI and all this technology and all these tech, companies coming together and surrounding themselves at the feet of Trump. I've got a lot of red hats who are crazy that we're going to have the liberals are going to bring social credit scores and they're going to bring this kind of internet tracking and they're going to bring all of this stuff. I've had so many right-wing conspiracies thrown at me that it makes me wonder, is this another one of those, it's not a cautionary tale, it's their playbook and it's what they're going to do. And I don't want to put on a tinfoil hat, but it seems like they're laying the groundwork to collect a lot of information on us and have a lot of levers into our lives.
Yeah, I mean, and to some extent, the ship is, or I guess the horse is out of the barn a bit on this. Unfortunately, like there's been a lot of defeats that privacy advocates have suffered in recent decades, and the amount of information that the private sector has on us is quite disturbing. But there have been limits to how badly that information can be used against us as people. And I think one of the unfortunate goals that promulgators of artificial intelligence have is to do more with that data. So if you are an insurance company and you're trying to figure out who's a good health risk or who's a bad health risk, the more information they can gobble up information and discern ways to not turn down coverage of people who might have health risks. They can do lots of stuff with this data. That's a lot of the types of things I think artificial intelligence is going to be used for, is to weaponize the privacy losses that we've already suffered and make them much more consequential.
No, and that's again my red hats. Be very afraid of your own people. You voted for this. This is what you wanted. And I fear we get what you want. Now they were, big tech wasn't the only one who did really well. Privatization, and I said, look, that's going to be the name of the game in everything from our government for the next 2 years. But more privatization on the prison front, right?
Yeah. So I mean, this was not a surprise given like the past people like Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. But Trump is got rid of the Biden era effort to rein in privately operated criminal detention facilities. Uh, like we should not have people who have an economic incentive in people being held in detention. That doesn't mean you have to support complete abolition. There are going to still be prisons, but you'd rather have that be part of the public system rather than having these private actors who, on the one hand, tend to treat people really terribly in their control. There's all sorts of evidence they treat people worse. They don't save any money in the course of doing it because they have to make a profit. So they tend to cost more, treat people less well, and they then exert political power to try to increase the number of people detained because it's in their interest, right? Like, what's better than having 1,000 detention beds? Well, 2,000 detention beds,
Exactly.
especially if you're making a lot of money for each one of them.
And you look at a lot of these contracts, they've got minimum occupancy numbers that governments have to meet or they got to pay for it, which is, you think Hilton or, Holiday Inn or any of the hotel companies around this country, they would love to have a minimum number of heads in beds each night.
Yeah, absolutely. Each night you have a bed that is not occupied. It's you put that money into building it and maintaining it, and you're paying out your bank note on it, and you want to make money off it. You want to make more money than you're paying, and that's going to create all sorts of perverse incentives for the system to bring more people in, and maybe alter the sort of prosecutorial discretion. Like maybe there's like a first time 18-year-old who's just done, did something not great, but like, do you want to put that, give that person a big scare and let them get back on the right track? Or do you want to put them in detention, which could alter the course of their entire life? Well, all of a sudden you're creating an economic incentive for detention.
Yeah, and look here in Pennsylvania where I live, there was a case of that a couple of years ago. In fact, I love Joe Biden, but I don't know how you pardon that guy. We had that Cash for Kids scandal that went on, where just what you said, minor crimes ended up being long detention sentences, all for the money. And anytime you put privatization and a profit motive ahead of the social need of the commons, you got problems. And look, with all of these rounding up of these immigrants and rounding up of the others, a privatized prison system should scare all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially you see with at times at least, Trump has talked about focusing on uh, immigrants, deportation efforts of migrants, of people who've actually committed crimes, which makes a lot more sense than going after law-abiding, peaceful people who are contributing members of our society.
You mean
Uh,
like you mean like raiding work sites and schools and churches? You mean that?
Yeah, I mean, so that's like he's going after to rack up numbers. And that's exactly the type of perverse behavior that privatization focuses on. So it's not only morally wrong to do it, it's also likely to some extent influenced by this corruption.
Last line of questioning I got for you. Look, it's going to be a long 2 years, potentially. It's going to be a long 4 years of Trump, but potentially 2 years of Republicans controlling both the House, the Senate, and the White House. How are we getting through this? What advice are you giving folks?
Well, I mean, for one thing, like we should not turn on each other. And what that means is if somebody else is doing opposition to Trump in a way that you don't like, you can say that that's not for me. But I think we should be generous toward our allies and steadfast against the things that are wrong. And so uh, I think we want to stay focused as much as possible. The people with the broadest reach should be focused on the economic and material impacts of having a corrupt president.
Yep.
But I also don't want to attack people who are defending any of the diverse interests that Trump is assaulting because if that's what motivates you, it's certainly admirable. And maybe that's not the best message to win a state as an elected candidate in 2026. But, we as Americans, we're not all running for office. We don't have to poll test everything we say. So I do want us, even as I agree that like the strategy, the big picture is to focus on the material impacts. I think we should just try to have each other's backs as much as possible. We all have to stay sane in our individual personal lives. So that doesn't mean we have to be on a ledge, threatening like awful things and thinking about politics 24/7. As much as you have the luxury to not think about it 24/7, you shouldn't. But let's have some charity in our heart for people who are doing resistance in their own way. And I don't think we should be as cynical as I think I'm seeing people be about what happened in 2017. I think the Women's March was commendable. I think it motivated a lot of people. And just because in the last few years we have to some extent frittered away the upside of the resistance to Trump in the first term doesn't mean that everything we did in those 4 year stretch was mistaken.
No, look, I think you have to come up with a clear vision. I think Democrats have to figure out what it is that their positions are, and hammer those constantly when things don't go as they're not going to go, because eggs aren't going to be a buck a dozen again. Gas ain't $1 a gallon now. In fact, eggs have gone up. Gas prices went up 15 cents again in my neighborhood. When the economy doesn't turn around and all the stuff that Trump's doing actually makes things worse, Democrats have to be there with a clear, consistent message, and they've got to be forceful in this. This is where you can't, in a street fight, offer to hold someone's coat. You got to get in there, ball up your digits, and you got to fight with Trump. Enough of the cowering. I'm tired of it.
Yeah, I mean, and then the other thing is when stuff goes badly, let's not give this guy, Donald Trump, of all people, the benefit of the doubt. When things happen that are bad, blame him. No one has ever claimed more ability to make stuff happen through their sheer force of will.
Yeah.
Donald Trump says everything is going to go right. So egg prices are going up now. And that's not Donald Trump's fault. I mean, that's bird flu. But when egg prices went up under Joe Biden, they were also due to bird flu, and no one gave Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt. And I really don't think Democrats like have to be consistent here. I mean, or they should be consistent, which is you blame stuff on the incumbent. That is what Republicans did. They did so in an intellectually dishonest way. So like we don't have to be as dishonest as they are, but we don't have to offer every single benefit of the doubt either and say, like, maybe in a few years we'll learn that this is Trump's fault. I think Trump owns it. He has hired corrupt people across the entire executive branch. Lots of things are going to go wrong. There's already life-saving science that is not being done because of like these blunderbuss, broad-based cessations of funding at the National Institutes of Health and elsewhere. There's like weird stuff happening because of Trump, and we should make him own all of it.
Absolutely. No, the buck's got to stop somewhere. And it stops at the Resolute desk and the orange menace who's behind it. Jeff, as always, I appreciate the thoughts. I know you'll be back. I can't wait to see more from the corruption calendar because, well, I think you're going to have a lot. I think there will be a lot of material to choose from.
Yes, no, sadly, the editing process is going to be difficult, but yeah, thanks for having me.
There you go. Jeff Hauser, Executive Director of the Revolving Door Project. Make sure you check out their website, the revolvingdoorproject.org.